Welcome to the Berlin Drawing Room.
Or I'll spend a little time on the drawing with everybody. So here I would start in the center with the body. And then let's first try to get the outline of the main shape of the wings. So these scalloped edges can be added in a little later. The symmetry of the butterfly is important. So once you've done one side, you'll want to compare to the other side. So like making sure that where the wing is attaching to the body is in the same spot on both sides, that this line corresponds to this line. You can even like just do a rough measurement. So just taking your hand and saying, this is this big. Is it the same on the other side? Looking at the distance from the edge of the wing to the body on both sides, trying to make sure that it's roughly symmetrical. These are just different ways of checking proportions. Just to the last comments in the chat, I did move the camera closer, so I hope that helps so that you can see the drawing better. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so once you have the rough outline of the wings and the body, then you can start adding some of the details on the inside. So I would start with these lines because they also add some structure. So I'm drawing these lines as if they're going through the patterning that's happening here. I'm ignoring it for now. Okay. So the patterning on the wings can be drawn in kind of roughly. You'll notice with the patterning, there aren't actually no hard edges. It's done in this very soft, diffuse way, which we will be looking at as a technique. So for the drawing, you can draw it just very light, very loose, the way I've done it here. So I'll just give people a couple of minutes and I'm gonna adjust this light. Try to get a little more light on the paper. Unfortunately, I have to move the camera a little further away from the paper once I start painting. Otherwise, can't really reach the paper. But the painting will be easier to see compared to the pencil lines. Okay. So I'm sure some people are working on their drawings still. Feel free to write into the comments at what stage you are in. It's always good to know since I can't really see what everybody is working on. But I am going to start. Okay, cool. Some people are ready. So I'm going to start moving on to the first stage of the painting. But like you can follow along really at your own pace. If you're not following along in the exact moment as me, this is also completely fine. So the first thing, actually, you can still kind of see it here. Like the first layer we're going to do is basically like black and white, well, and gray. So if you see here, for example, on this wing where I haven't added the red yet, you can see this structure of the wing painted in various shades of gray. And yeah, you can see the effect of that here when the color is added and the patterning and the texture is added. It keeps it from flattening out too much. And yeah, you want to have that underlying structure. So it's also going to guide us as to where to put the color and where we need to leave white spaces. So for that, I'm going to create my go-to gray. So this go-to gray for me is a combination of alizarin crimson and viridian green. I'm kind of laughing at the way that the closed captioning is translating the pigment names. So I guess Zoom is not familiar with alizarin crimson. So this combination of alizarin crimson and viridian green is very, very handy. It's just a shortcut to, I guess it's pretty close to what some people buy, a pigment called neutral tint. I mean, I don't know, I never bought that because it's actually nice to mix it yourself because sometimes I want to have a warm gray, sometimes I want to have a cool gray, and you know, you can change it depending on if you add more green or more red, more crimson. So this would be like with more green.
Mira, are you just doing the gray and not the lines, or are we doing the lines after the gray?
We're gonna use the gray to do the lines. If that makes sense. Right now I'm just mixing them. I realize you can't see the edge of the palette where I'm mixing them, but basically what I'm doing is I'm mixing a gray out of, here, I'll just put it over here where you can see these two colors. So I'm basically making a mixture of viridian green and alizarin crimson until they cancel each other out and just create a gray.
Could you just use Payne's gray? Too much gray then, right?
This is Payne's gray, and I mean, Payne's gray to me is like reads as blue. So it's not gray, actually. I don't know why it's called that. If you have a neutral tint, you can use that.
Is there another green besides viridian?
If you don't have viridian green, then I would say to use like if you have a gray on your palette, you could use that. Like, I mean, if you have Payne's gray, you can neutralize the blue a bit by adding like a little bit of orange, and then that'll just turn it into a more neutral gray. Otherwise, yeah, you'll have to mix a gray from scratch. Do you have a gray in your palette that you can use? Anything close?
No.
Okay, well, to mix the gray from scratch, you'll have to use all three primary colors, the cool versions. So, and basically until they cancel each other out to make it short. So basically make a purple and then add a little bit of yellow to it. So I'm just gonna continue on. Hopefully that gives enough options for everybody. And you know, this is kind of a taster class. If you don't have all the colors this time, you know, maybe next time you have a few more. Wouldn't put too much pressure on this because it's just one class and it's going to be a beautiful butterfly. So I'm going to start by just going over some of these lines. We are painting now. So I'm using a very transparent, which means with water. Using a very transparent layer at the beginning. So with watercolor, we always go from more transparent layers at the beginning to more opaque layers later on. And even though my paint is quite diluted, my brush does not have a lot of water on it. So basically what that means is I've added water to my pigment, and then I always keep a paper towel ready, and I can use this to control the amount of water on my brush. So just drying off my brush and then dipping only the very tip of the brush into my paint mixture. You might notice that the lines that I'm painting with the gray are actually like relatively thick compared to the lines you see on the butterfly, and that's because these first lines, with the additional layering, they will actually become more like shadows. So we are going to build this up using layers. So not everything needs to be perfect right in the beginning. So the body, the brush is a size 4 that I'm using right now. I tend to like to use like the biggest brush that I can. I mean, this is a pretty small brush, but I'm not using, like, even though I'm painting lines, I'm not going in there with like a number 1 or a number 2 brush, because the bigger brushes, they hold more paint, so you can work more quickly. More in here. Also, if you have a good watercolor brush, you can paint pretty much everything, including fine detail, with like a number 6 brush. If you've got a really good sable brush. This is actually not a very good brush, so whatever. It's fine though for this purpose. Let's see, I didn't draw them, but I'm actually gonna add just freehand a few more lines in here. You know, if you look in the photo, you don't see these lines super clearly, but you just see the indication of them, so. here as well. Oh, right, I was saying the hairy body. So when I move in to define some of these areas in here, I'm actually going to just use like a flicking motion with my wrist, and I'm already gonna start adding this frayed edge that you get from the hairiness of the body. So I'll just demonstrate that real quickly on this other piece of paper, because this is something, a couple of things we're going to be doing a lot of is like so for hairy areas, this is just a way of building up texture, and it does not work if you do it like if you try to be too precise. If you really like look at every line and you're like going like this, I mean, it starts to look mechanical. So I really recommend, if you've never done this before, that you do just take a piece of scrap paper, maybe just where you're testing your colors, and just practice. Like I'm putting my hand on the table so that I have just this restrained movement, and I'm moving from here, from this joint, right? So, and then I'm doing this flick. And I'm just letting the very tip of the brush hit the paper. So, and the other thing we're gonna do later, you know, for this speckled texture, is like, you know, these dots, which is the same thing. If you really painstakingly do like one dot at a time, I just feel like when you're painting something like a plant or animal, and you want to have the texture look organic, like at least for me, I need to build some kind of a release into the motion of my hand, because if I'm too careful with it, I'll end up creating some kind of a pattern that looks like man-made or mechanical. It just doesn't look organic, because you don't want all the dots to be the same. You don't want them to be evenly spaced. You want them to overlap. You want it to be irregular. So that's, we'll have lots of chances to practice that here. Okay, so next, I'm taking a number 2 brush now. If you don't have a lot of different brushes, like it's also, just use the tip of whatever brush you have. It's not really that critical. One kind of funny thing with the gray mixtures is that you need to stir them if you haven't used it for a second, because certain pigments are heavier than others. So some are going to sink to the bottom. And now I'm using a thicker version of the paint. And I'm going to go to the top edge. And add another line.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you do those with pigment liners?
I mean, of course you can. It would look, it'll just be a totally different look than a watercolor.
Okay, thanks.
Nothing wrong with it. Oops. I put this on the- Okay, now I'm just gonna start blocking in some of the darker areas. I'm gonna go back to my bigger brush side. And the paint. So this is not the final version of this black. Oops. Right. Not even really where I want the black to be. That's why we go in transparent at the beginning. So, no problem. So the first layer is going to be just more like blocking things in. It's not going to be the intense colors yet or the sharp opaque blacks. Okay, so now I'm going to do this bottom edge here, and I want to have a little bit of a warmer color. So I can actually take the gray that I have and add a little bit more red, and then I'm going to add, so it's this purplish color now. I'll just add a little bit of yellowish orange. Just anything along those lines should work to turn it brown. Let's see, that might be too brown. This is now a little too warm. I'm just going to adjust it one more time. Taking a little bit of phthalo blue. And yeah, that'll do. Okay, so this is, oops, got some noise going on again. Background noise. See if I can find that.
If I don't have phthalo blue, could I use cobalt or?
What else do you have? Cobalt? Might be a little
ultramarine. I
yeah,
have
ultramarine might work better. Cobalt.
Prussian. Okay.
Yes, that one. That
Okay.
one. That's closest.
Okay.
Yeah. For these darker colors, cobalt blue is. We're gonna use that actually later for the spots. I used that because it's much lighter. Okay.
What color is our goal right now?
So we are going to be painting this brown edge around the wings now. So the goal at the moment was just mixing the color. So now I've got the color. What I'm going to do is I want the edge to be quite soft. So I'm going to actually paint with water just a little above. So you probably can't really see it, but I just added some water right above where I'm going to be painting. Just a little, just with a damp brush, so that I make sure I have a really soft edge. And then I have a second, I'm using two brushes right now. So my second brush just has water on it. And see, I'm letting this bleed now. It's bleeding into the area that I wet in advance. And then I'm continuing to encourage that bleeding with the damp brush. And then I'm going over it one more time while it's wet, just on that bottom edge, adding more darker color again. Wetting this area. Oops. Oh, I'm making a real mess of my paper today. I'm gonna hold this up in just a second so you can really see what I'm doing. So this is creating this soft edge by adding water to the top and letting and then adding more paint to the bottom so that it bleeds together. So if you didn't get that the first time, I'm gonna do it again. And I didn't even mix enough paint, so.
Are we doing on the other side too, what you're doing on the left?
Yeah,
Should we
so
do,
now,
okay.
now I'm doing the other side. So here we go.
Just going to get.
A little bit of water.
Huh.
So, I mean, I just find this goes much quicker if you've got two brushes, one for water and one for the paint. You could like clean your brush in between and then add water, but it's just faster.
Here. Okay. Yeah. Huh.
So as this dries, it tends to even out a little bit. And I do want that bottom edge to be darker. So I can just go over that bottom edge one more time. It's close enough in color that I don't need to blend it again with the water. I can just add that darker edge. And while I'm at it, some of these lines that I lost. Actually, it could be a little darker. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing on some of these other edges where you have the same fading kind of brown. And this is a technique you can use for a lot of things, like whenever you want to blend an edge.
Right, you got his number.
I will.
So we've got a similar thing happening here, for example.
Message him to say we're trying to ring you.
Please answer the house phone.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of people not muted.
Yeah.
Wait till it gets a tick. Ring him in a couple of minutes.
Oh, sorry, I can't figure out who it is.
It's gone blue. Let's just see if he answers. Hello?
Sorry, I can't figure out who's talking.
Oh, sorry, just a second. Are you there?
Kath Corbett, can you mute yourself?
I just figured it out. I just muted that person. I can do it from my end, but I have to know who it is. Let's see, where else can we use this effect? Oh yeah, on these parts. Here. See this, I forgot about this edge, dried. If I was trying to mute someone. Anyway, the nice thing about layering is that these effects are going to accumulate. So little mistakes, we can afford some. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to block in where some of these blue shapes, these light blue shapes are, because it's quite easy to forget about them and then accidentally paint over them, and also the white spots that are inside of the blue shapes. So I want to just make sure I do this kind of early on before I get to other colors. So I'm using cobalt blue for this. If you don't have cobalt blue, just use the lightest blue that you have. And I'm going to paint around these little white dots. So basically, I'm using this as a chance to define the white dots. I'm just leaving the edges pretty, I'm painting very transparently, and I'm leaving the edges kind of ragged because it's going to work with the texture later on. I'll just hold this up since that's so tiny. So I haven't bothered to draw these white spots because they're the edges are so soft. I don't want to have a hard line there. So I'm just in a loose style painting around them. So I just kind of draw the outline of that dot and then I just paint around those edges. If I get too far, I also want to add, I want to use now my very darkest gray mixture that's as close to black as possible and a small brush. And I'm going to paint these stripes at the top. Again, I haven't drawn these because, you know, these are meant to be irregular. So I'm like just sketching them in with the tip of my brush. I'm not drawing hard lines. I'm making it kind of rough. Hopefully you can see that.
Down a little bit, that's okay. So we're going to take that yellow right down to the bottom. The whole bottom, beautiful yellow.
Is someone watching a different tutorial? Who's painting yellow? I can't find. I can't find the unmuted culprit again. Whoever's watching another tutorial, mute yourself.
Just drying off any excess that I have at the sides.
Where is that coming from?
While that's still wet, I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to clear
Mira,
out a
you should have
section
a button where you can mute just all of us.
about 1 foot height, clearing that out.
I was going to say that actually there should be a mute all.
I know, right? I mean,
see that section that
I'm not
just wiped it clean. Now that paint might want to try and come back in again, so we'll have to do it at once.
I'm looking for that.
But we want to clear out.
Not seeing it.
It's okay if we have a little bit of yellow stain in the background.
Is it like a square? It's Kathleen. What is that? Kathleen on your iPad.
Blue. We'll be painting black on the bottom of it, but we do want the top part.
Is it off now?
But did you use some just wet to get that off? Or just dry?
I used a dry paper towel because the paint's wet.
I think Catalina's doing a different tutorial. I don't really funny. Okay. So I'm going back over this top edge now, so you can see that it gives a more finished look already as it overlaps with the stripes and then hides that upper edge. You can, yeah, you can start to see how the layering is working there. And okay.
What did you put on top? Sorry, of the
Oh,
black?
I just added the really dark gray, the black on this very top edge here.
Ah, okay.
And it overlapped with the stripes so that you don't see the top of the stripes anymore, just giving it a more finished look. Okay.
Glad someone was like watching another tutorial and you could hear it coming through on the volume. Someone was watching another tutorial. It was coming through on the volume, and this poor woman who's trying to teach. She's like,
Girly, you're unmuted now, hon.
Okay. So I'm going to start blocking in the color now. I really hope everyone can mute themselves because I can't stop like in between. Once I start doing washes of color, I am not going to be able to stop. So I'm going to be using a cadmium red light. That's like an orangish red color. I'm going to be using just kind of orangish yellow, not anything particularly special. So this color, and then, yeah, as you guys already know, I'm using this cobalt blue. So we've got like a real primary color butterfly here. Okay, I'm gonna start with the lightest color. I've already got the blue, so the other light color would be this yellow. And like in here, where you've got like this, it almost looks like gold specks. That's so cool, but I'm just gonna add a base layer of yellow because I'll be able, since the black is darker, I'll be able to add that over the top. I'm just gonna block that in now. And same, very transparent, not to overdo it. It's not a very strong yellow. Actually got the same thing in the body. So this whole thing isn't yellow, but the places where you see yellow coming through, I'm just adding a base layer of yellow. Soften that a little bit. I'm actually gonna bring this yellow out a little bit further because I can see that the yellow blends in with the red here gradually. And when I overlap the colors, so sometimes you mix colors separately in your palette, and sometimes you mix colors actually by layering on the paper. Why do the gray lines not dissolve or blend when you paint wet yellow over them? The gray mixture that I made is from alizarin crimson and viridian green. These are two highly staining colors. And there's no thick buildup of pigment. Everything is very thin layers. So I can paint over that and it doesn't lift off. Are you having a different experience or it's just a question? If that doesn't make sense, let me know. While I'm at it, I mean, you do have to be somewhat careful. Like here, I want to add yellow where these black stripes are, but here I've used a thicker paint already. So actually, I'm not going to take a lot of water and paint over this. I'm just gonna dab at it a little bit. Now I'm only using the tip of my brush. I'm not like super precisely painting between here, but I'm not just covering the whole thing with a lot of water. For making a deep black, so yeah, it's basically just a stronger version of the gray that I used initially. So I'm still using for that the alizarin crimson and viridian green, just with the least amount of water, and then that pretty much gets you a black. If you have a black on your palette, you can also use that. I like mixing my own blacks because then you have more choices. But either way. Just a tip also about painting from photographs. A lot of times the grays in photos, like that do contain other colors in them, they tend to look very black in a photo. So sometimes, I mean, we're not gonna get the same like super opaque, super flat black that's in this photo, but this photo also looks as though it's been somewhat manipulated to be like more saturated and more contrast. So I think, yeah, it's probably okay if we don't necessarily achieve that. If you wanted a more illustration style where things were really sharp, you could actually use a black gouache. That could be something quite fun to try, actually. I'm just using this brown mixture. Also, as the paints dry here, they get more concentrated. So like here over on the side, my gray mixture has dried. If I just, instead of adding water to it, if I just were to stick a wet brush in there, I would get a very concentrated black. I'm also using this flicking motion that I talked about before here, I'm gonna start to add, using this brown that I'd mixed earlier, but it dried up a bit, so it's more concentrated now. And I'm just using it, thick, dark brown. Again, this is going to go under another layer. So when I paint over this, it will get softer. If I wanted really hard edges, like on this fur texture, I could do it afterwards, but I'm doing it before I add the color, the main color, because I want it to get like a bit blended later, because it's not so strong, it's soft. And here this looks a bit sharp just on the white. But as I paint over it, like it'll soften up and just become like this, just a soft furry texture. Kind of amazing how many textures there are. One thing I can really, really recommend to anybody who wants a very special treat is to, if you have the opportunity, to look at a moth or a butterfly underneath a microscope. It's just one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever seen. It looks like a sequin gown from like a handmade sequin gown, like the most couture sequins and feathers combined. So, so stunning. When we have in-person classes at the Berlin Drawing Room, I've got a couple of microscopes, and that's always kind of a highlight. Okay, so are we ready for the red? What do people think? That's always like big moment. And some red. So this pigment, red pigment that I'm using, is really intense and really opaque. So I'm gonna be a little cautious in the beginning. I don't want to go crazy with it. So I'm gonna, since I'm still blocking things in terms of color, I'm just gonna use a very transparent layer and see, okay, like first of all, just where does the red even go? Block it in a little bit first. Here, should be blended.
I'm sorry, Mira, are you using alizarin crimson, or could you use the red that you told us, the orange red? I had cad red.
Yeah, the cadmium red light, the orangish red. Put red in the wrong spot. I'm blending a little bit into the yellow here as I go. It's starting to look like something now. Okay, I'm gonna mix a little bit of brown with that red. Here, there's some darker areas. And it has a texture to it. So I'm gonna use this flicking motion again. But like here, the strokes are much thicker.
I'm sorry, Mia, what did you add to the cad red? I have cad red, but you added sienna?
Oh, here I just added a little bit of the brown mixture that I'd made earlier. But
With the red. I see. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm gonna add some darker red. Like, if you look closely at the wings, it's not just flat, solid color, right? And this is the thing, like, I mean, I think that's just when you see really intense color like this, like the temptation is to really go for it right away and think like, I'll do the color and then I can do the details later. But once you've flattened out an area, it's really hard to make it not flat. So that's why like I'm taking so much care to build up to the areas of color, because I don't want it to just read like a colored in coloring book, you know, like of a butterfly. So, because I think especially with this subject matter, that is kind of like a risk that you could run. So I think trying to avoid as much as possible filling in large areas where the with flat color. No, it's already dry underneath, Julia.
Can you show a close-up of the bottom where you worked?
Yeah. So like right now it might feel ununified, like there are too many different things going on and too many textures, but it's easier to unify things than it is to get the dimensionality, if that makes sense. I'm using a little thicker paint now, the red. And there are just these subtle lines that go through the blue. I want to try to capture that. Here can be even a chance to use that stippling already.
Yeah, I'm sorry I have to leave, but I got most of it. Is there something else you were going to do after this layer?
Yeah, so now I'm going to do the stippling of the black in this area. Like
Got
this.
it. Okay, with the black or with the kind of red and that brown, that gray thing that you made us do?
I'm actually going to use like a black that's closer to purple now. When I was experimenting, I found that it showed a bit more contrast
Okay.
with the red and yellow areas than the gray that I was using before. So this is actually the color that I'm using. It's a really dark purple, and it's a combination of the phthalo blue and alizarin crimson. And so I'm using a really quite dark mixture there. And I'm going to add in some of the
I have a cad red closer to the body. Is that okay if I go over it with a stipple? Or because I have a lot of red next to the body. You have white, so could I just go over it with that strip? Oh,
yeah.
okay, okay.
I mean, you know, it's going to be an interpretation, so everyone's is going to be different. So that's all good. So now I can just continue with this color to bring this together. So maybe I should say before people start dropping out, if people can't stay till the very end, that I'm teaching regular watercolor classes online on botanical watercolor illustration. So this is a little different, a little bit of a special topic today with the butterflies. So normally I'm teaching about plants, and I've got a class starting next week called Botanical Watercolor Composition, where we'll go through the steps of, instead of doing a different plant every week, creating a more complex composition over several classes. And then after that, I'll just start back up again with my regular winter botanical watercolor workshop, which is different specimens every week and learning different techniques every week, learning a bit about the history of botanical illustration, and learning a little bit about the plants. And I thought also to do a butterfly, because I think in the botanical watercolor composition workshop, we'll have the option at the end to add like a pollinator or some other insect ally or pest to our plant compositions. So this has a little bit of overlap with that class.
So Mira, you know your close up of the texture, is that the part you're doing right now? That really the black and white sort of abstracted picture.
Oh no, that's under a really intense magnification. So that's something you can't see with the naked eye. I just thought it was like interesting. Karen, was that you, Karen? That's like just the photograph. If you scroll down below the reference images, that's taken through a microscope, and I just thought because we're working so much with texture that it was fun to see that, to know like how much, where that texture comes from on a very magnified level. But we're not going to try to paint that because we can't even see it. How do you guys like doing the stippling? I think it's kind of fun. Is that working for people? You can try different size brushes or see what's comfortable for you. So I'll show you here. This is why I also wanted to use this more purple color as the black. I think it's a nice effect here. So we did earlier this brown edge that's sort of faded. And then you've got the sort of much cooler, darker purple on the inside of that. So I think you get a similar effect to the butterfly where you have this really subtle change here of like too brown to purpley black, soft to hard. I like seeing those next to each other. It's not the super opaque black from the photo, but therefore you get this nice, we get to play with colors of it. Gonna add a bit more red now. So this time, going even more concentrated color. So I'm painting over this area. It's transparent. So I'm painting over the area where I did that texture, and that texture might have seemed a little bit abrupt to you before, but when you see them layered, I think it creates a nice effect.
Can you put the picture a bit higher, please? Thank you.
adding a little bit of orange actually for this transition. I'm just adding strokes of the most intense color. I don't want to go over everything because I'll lose my layering. Oops. I'm gonna add a little more blue, but just using kind of like this stippling to just get some texture in there, to try to get a little bit of this shimmery effect. So I could keep fidgeting with this for a very long time, I think, but I do want to bring it to a conclusion before everyone has to leave. So I'm just making a brown. I've been using these purpley browns up until now. I'm making a more orange brown to just go over the body. So you can kind of see how those things.
What colors did you use for this?
Let's see, I had this brown mixture from earlier that was more purple, and I just added some orange to it. So what did I use to make that brown mixture originally? I used, I think I used this combination, what I had of the alizarin crimson and the phthalo, the viridian green, like this gray color, and then to that I added a bit of the cadmium red and a bit of the phthalo blue. And And I think I'll just do a little bit of the stippling also on the body. So now it's just making some small corrections. I could sort of blend these areas a little bit more, but I kind of like it the way it is. So I think I'll leave it like that. Oh, huh, the antenna. I'll just use this, what I've been using for the stippling. I'm going to use a #1 brush now. Okay, so I think I'm done. We are, we don't have much time left, but we did actually get a little bit of a late start. So if anybody would like to share their work, it would be great to see it. I'll remove the spotlight. Does anybody want to share what they've been working on?
For current workshop offerings, please visit our website. Thank you for watching.